Before we get started, I did want to acknowledge the Monacan Indian Nation as the traditional stewards of the land upon which the University of Lynchburg now sits, and we offer our respect to the Monacan people, past, present, and emerging. The University Lecture Series, which began in 2018 when we became a university, features scholars and experts from the University of Lynchburg and celebrates their roles as educators, mentors, and researchers who make an impact on our campus and well beyond. We invite our entire campus community, as well as the general public, to come and learn from their fascinating insights. This evening, we are excited to welcome Dr. Tim Schauer. Dr. Schauer has been an associate professor of marketing in the College of Business here for 3 years. He serves on a number of committees and is actively engaged in student recruitment. His great love is instilling a passion for learning into his students, exemplified by the enthusiasm he brings into the classroom. And I think I see many of his students here this evening, so I'm glad that you're here. Before academia, Dr. Schauer worked within the marketing and advertising industry for more than 25 years and now brings his experience into the classroom. He led the marketing efforts for a number of regional retailers and operated his own advertising agency for almost a decade, developing and implementing marketing strategies for a variety of corporations, including the National Guard, Campbell Soup, Turkey Hill Dairies, Harley-Davidson, Palmer Chocolate, Shady Maple Farm Market, and Smorgasbord. That's quite a mouthful. And the Special Olympics. Throughout his career, he has developed numerous marketing campaigns, led several marketing and sales teams, and managed multi-million-dollar budgets. Tonight, Tim talks to us about a topic he has lived out, entrepreneurial thinking. Please join me as I welcome Tim to the podium.
Well, we have some tough competition here tonight. I understand there's a comedic hypnotist on campus. Is that true? That's not me. And frankly, I think it's probably more fun. And but at the end, I guess we're both going to put people to sleep. So that'll, okay, it's going to get better from here. So this week, or last week, I got this, an email from my hometown, the Fightin' Phils. It's a minor league baseball team in Reading, Pennsylvania. And they were asking anyone who might want to sing the national anthem to apply. The tryouts were last Saturday. And they included this picture. And so one of the interesting things here is that's Bucky there. He's one of the 11 mascots. 11 mascots. They probably felt like if one's good, let's create 11. But anyway, does anybody recognize who this might be? There's a lot of heads going up. Who is it? Taylor Swift, one of my favorite millennials. She was probably about 12 years old. She was born and raised in Reading, Pennsylvania, my hometown. And they wanted everyone to know that if you sing the national anthem at the Fightin' Phils, there's a good chance you're going to end up a world superstar. And so there we go. The reason that I brought up Taylor Swift, because she is quite a well-known, and arguably one of the top known millennials in the world, quite entrepreneurial. In fact, Taylor Swift revolutionized, she redefined the relationship between music artists and streaming services. So, to my knowledge, doesn't own a business, but she's very entrepreneurial. There was a recent survey of millennials, and the question that was asked to the millennials was this: what's your top life goals? And they asked them to list the top 3 goals. What do you think? And the results were 80 and 50. There's some others, of course, but these were the top 2. 80% of millennials' top life goal, at least their top 3, is, what is it? Anybody got a guess? Wealth. What do you think the second one is? 50% of millennials' top goals is what? Wealth and what goes along with it? Fame. Fame. Now, this was interesting to me, and what I found fascinating about it, because you can argue over the merit of these goals, but they really don't speak to the journey itself. These are end goal things. And I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurial thinking, which is more of the journey. Will it result in fame or wealth? Potentially. But it's far more than business, and it's far more than just the final outcome. Cliff Michaels, who wrote a really interesting book called The 4 Essentials of Entrepreneurial Thinking, said this: "It's your life. Strive to do what you love, why you do it, and who you do it with." Now, this is Dr. Santos. Anybody recognize this name? She's on faculty at a small college you might have heard of, Yale. She started a course on happiness. Happiness. It's the most attended course in Yale in the last 300 years. She took it online. They've now, there's been 3.7 million people that have taken this course. You can take it for free. If you do want to pay $49, you can also get a certification of completion, and you do all the assignments and so on. So for $49. Now, I just saw on one of the morning shows, she's taking this to the high schools. And she also does a podcast. And so I found this interesting. And by the way, for you faculty members out there, that's really good. Life is a lot like this game, the Candyland game. Oh, who can forget Lord Licorice and Princess Lolly up here? But life is kind of like this. It's twisty and turny, and you sort of lay your own path out, right? You go at your own speed, certain things happen, but you also, that your journey is determined by other people on the board. And so I want to do something before we go any further, because I think that, and this is one of the things we'll talk about in terms of entrepreneurial thinking, I think that a lot of us are afraid to take some action, to take steps. And maybe tonight, somebody in this room may be very important to your journey. I don't think we talk enough about the value of networking with people. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. This is an introvert's nightmare. But I want you to stand up, and I want you to walk to one person that you don't know. Go over to them, make eye contact with them, walk up to them, introduce yourself to them, exchange names, repeat their name, remember their name, because we'll have a quiz, and then go back to your seat. Okay? Here we go. 1, 2, go. Okay, great. You did it. Fantastic, you all did it. Now, I am a bit biased about this networking thing. I do teach a course on sales and sales management, so I see the value in this networking. By the way, just a little aside, do you know that half of all undergrads will sell something in their life as part of their career? And that's not just business students. That's across the board. That's what research shows. So learning these life skills, while I believe it's part of entrepreneurial thinking, is really useful and valuable in our personal journeys and our careers. So tonight, we're going to discuss entrepreneurial thinking. Now, I'm not naive or hubristic enough to think that entrepreneurial thinking will make you happy. I'm not teaching a course for 3.7 million people on happiness, but I do strongly believe that if we enforce or adapt or utilize some of the principles in entrepreneurial thinking, I believe, and I don't care what you do in your life, I believe it will enlarge your life. It will enlarge your life. And that's where we're going to take a look at tonight. From classroom to boardroom, to battlefield, we all are capable of entrepreneurial thinking, be it an artist, an athlete, a CEO. We boldly go where others may dream. By definition, entrepreneurs lie awake at night with a driving force that says there is a better way. We'll look at tonight at business and non-business examples. So this goes beyond business when I talk about entrepreneurial thinking. And I wanted to make one other point. No matter how good you think you are already, maybe you think, I got most of this. One of the things that always has impressed me about Bill Clinton, and you might like his politics or you might not like his politics, he was probably, at least in my estimation, one of the best communicators I've ever heard. And the thing that fascinated me about him was that into his second term as president, he still worked with a speech coach. So somebody who is extraordinarily good still seeking or sought to get better. So entrepreneurial thinking will inspire you to take those risks you took tonight. By the way, if anybody met their future spouse, please email me, because I really would like to put that somehow in my CV. So entrepreneurial thinking is opportunistic. We see these opportunities, so we first have to learn to recognize them, and then we're going to have to learn to seize them. Half the battle is recognizing there's an opportunity to be had. I'm going to give you a chance tonight. We're going to work on a couple things together, and I'm going to hope that you can work with me to find the opportunity in these products. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So in class, in fact, the gentleman who asked me this question is actually in this room right now, and I've chuckled about this since the day he asked me. It was in our sales class, and he asked me this question. Of all the things you sold, what's the thing that you're most proud of selling? And I thought for about 2 seconds and said, I got my wife to marry me. I sold myself, right? Now, I was kind of joking about it, but on some level, I think that might be true. I had a friend one time who was, he was a salesperson, and he loved to think about the big opportunities. And he used to challenge me. He'd say, what's your big white whale? What is it you really want to accomplish? Like, if you could sell something to the biggest client, who would it be? And he would challenge me. So guess what? Whose his was? Now, this is back in 2006. Donald Trump. He said, I want to sell something to Donald Trump, when he was still a businessman before any politics. So this is what he did. He lived in like the Allentown area, which was about an hour and a half from New York City. And of course, Trump lived up there. He found out where Trump went to eat. He found out where his favorite bars were. He found out that he loved boxing. This guy was an amateur boxer. So he got signed, autographed gloves by maybe Evander Holyfield, I think it was. And he arranged that when Donald Trump came into this bar one night, that he could present these gloves to Donald Trump. Fascinating. Here was a guy who saw opportunity and he acted on it. And entrepreneurial thinking does just that. It's opportunistic. When I was in high school, there was a couple of adages in our high school. One of them was written on the homeroom wall, and I never forgot it. It said this, something like this: sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut and appear ignorant than to open it and remove all doubt. And the second one was this. Posted on the side of the building were these words: live to learn to live. And that inspired me. I remembered that all of my life. Live to learn and learn to live. But I found out about 2 years ago there was a third part to that. And it says, and then teach others. I want to talk a little bit about the guy who coined that. And his name is Douglas Horton. Douglas Horton was 77 years old when he passed away. He was no slouch. He went to Princeton University. He then went to Harvard Seminary in Connecticut, and he eventually became the dean of the Harvard Divinity School. And this is what he did. Absolutely nothing to do with business at all. He advanced the notion that God desired for those Protestant churches separated for generations due to minor conflicts over theology and more speciously ethnic and socioeconomic differences to overcome the alienations of the past and join forces to build a stronger Christian witness to a world beset by wars, poverty, and increasing indifference or hostility towards spiritual matters. He started a denomination. Now, if you have ever served on any sort of a church committee, you realize how mind-numbing that is. This man started a denomination, and he created the Evangelical and Reformed Church. It was a Protestant Christian denomination. In the U.S., it was formed in 1934 by the merger of the Reformed Church of the United States and the Evangelical Synod of North America. Although Horton never owned a business, he never started anything, he thought like an entrepreneur, and this is how he thought like an entrepreneur. He created some pathway to some imagined vision and then systematically put together the cobblestones needed to make the pathway. He also had a couple of other sayings I thought were really cool, and I think, Gerald, you'll like this last one. This is one. Thinking good thoughts is not enough. Doing good deeds is not enough. Seeing others follow your good examples is enough. Second one, the art of simplicity is a puzzle of complexity. Can I get an amen to that, Allison's? Amen. And this is the one that the econ professor will love. First rule of economics, 101. Our desires are insatiable. Second rule, we can only stomach 3 Big Macs at a time. And so I'm going to add to the things that we were putting in our bucket for entrepreneurial thinking. It's opportunistic, it's visionary, and it's actionable. He didn't just sit on his hands, he actually did something with it. This next one might surprise you. King Solomon, second king of Israel, wisest man on earth. He built a temple to the Lord. But let's listen to the plans to implement the project. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month. So they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. He had 70,000 carriers of the stones and 80,000 stone cutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. And by the way, 80,000 stone cutters, Lynchburg's population is right around 80,000, just to give you an idea of the enormity of the project and how he managed it. And by the way, this wasn't a little building. Just to give you an idea, it was 150 feet long, 25 feet wide, and 40 feet tall. And the cranes were broken to build it. Well, okay, that was a joke, but they did all this by hand. So I'm going to add one to the mix here. It's process-oriented. All of the entrepreneurs I've ever met are all of these things. Yet we haven't yet even talked about a business person. And so we'll do that now. First of all, before we get into that, what does entrepreneur even mean? Well, it's a French verb. It means to undertake, to undertake. And the second, and from that, that's derived from Latin, which is two words, between and to take. So there's this notion of, I'm here, and I'm going to get there, but we're kind of in between. We're undertaking this project, but we're not really done with it, and yet we're not in the safety of our own home. And so there's this element of ambiguity. I used to think that entrepreneurs were risk takers, crazy risk takers. They went to the casinos and just threw it all on one number. And what I came to learn, both from personal experience working with entrepreneurs and from researching entrepreneurship, they like to mitigate risk. They're best when they mitigate that risk. Will they take one? Yes, but it's not foolishly done. It's thought through. There's plans. There's process. They understand where they're going. And we could talk about a number of different entrepreneurs where this is true. But what I want to do to help us understand entrepreneurial thinking even more, I do want to turn to business people that we might know. And it's helpful to look at them to sort of underpin this use of the word entrepreneur. Even business entrepreneurs can look quite different. So what I want to look at is one industry a century apart. Two entrepreneurs, one from the 20th century, one from the 21st century, and they both work in the automobile industry. And you probably can guess who we're going to pick here, right? The first one, Henry Ford. Now, Henry is quite an interesting guy. On one hand, I love Henry Ford. I don't know if you've ever read much on this guy, but he's a fascinating man. On the other hand, he really got into some problems later on with some kind of odd thinking. But we all understand that this idea of Fordism, which of course we all know is this mass production. It was the idea of process, that we could make something efficiently, that we could reduce the cost to make it. Now, what you may not know is that Henry Ford never set out to build automobiles. That was not his first choice. He was a watchmaker. As a young boy, he would take watches apart, and he also would fix watches for people, and he wanted to go into the watchmaking business for two reasons. One, he knew he could create process, the assembly line, to make them consistent and cheap. And the second one, he had this innate desire to do good for mankind. And some might argue there was a bit of his own agenda in that. But he would often talk about doing things so that the other guy gets a fair shake. And by the way, when he started to produce an automobile, his investors were very upset with Henry Ford because they said, why don't we just charge more? We'll create a higher profit. We'll only sell to the people that have the money and forget about this common man bit. And he said, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to make my cars inexpensive so that anybody could buy them. So Fordism, consumerism, he got that. He understood that people have desire to buy things. So again, there's understanding here. I was recently doing some research about how the COVID impacted retailers. And I remember speaking to an author, his name is Paco Underhill, who wrote a number of books on retailing. And I had him on the phone. He lives up in New York. And I asked him, is the pandemic the death knell for retail? And this is what he said to me. He said, don't worry about that one bit. The monster of consumption is very much alive. Henry Ford got that. He developed what we call welfare capitalism, the idea that I'll forget about the government providing these benefits to you. I'm going to pay you a fair wage, $5 a day at the time, and we'll create an 8-hour work week, which will provide for you more leisure time. Of course, since there was more leisure time and more money, you could afford to buy one of his cars. See how that works? But he developed that, and of course, the whole franchise model. People didn't take their horses up to Detroit and then drive their car back. And he knew that he had to figure out a way to get the automobiles accessible to people. In marketing, we call that the 4th P, placement. How do we distribute it? And so he developed these ideas of dealers and showrooms and where people could order their cars. And of course, then they were shipped by rail from Detroit. So he was a fascinating man, very poorly educated. The man had an 8th grade education. As I mentioned, he had this mentality of helping the greater good. He worked very hard. He was tenacious. He kept working at it. There were many stories of him. I don't know how his wife tolerated this, but night after night after night, he'd be in his shop. And he'd be working on these combustion engines to see if he could get it more powerful, more efficient, more consistent, more reliable. I think if I'd have been her, I'd have burned that thing down, the shop. But he worked tirelessly. Now let's look at another person. Mr. Musk. Very different. Same industry. Here's a guy that is very well educated. He, if I can find my note here. Yeah, here we go. He went to the University of Pennsylvania. He got a degree in economics and physics. No slouch. He dropped out of the Stanford PhD program after 2 days. But he was still really well educated and very smart. Actually, he's from South Africa. I'm sure many of you know that. He started a number of companies. Unlike Ford, who really only worked in the Ford Motor Company, he started Zip2, X.com, PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, Solar City and Tesla Energy, Neuralink, The Boring Company, and finally, Twitter for $44 billion. Yes, I stuttered because it's hard for me to say billion. So here's a guy that now we're going to add another thing on to the bottom line there. He was committed. Henry Ford was committed. By the way, Henry Ford, during the Depression, you can imagine what the automobile sales looked like. He was, in 1930, he had a profit of $40 million, but he lost $88 million from 32 to 33. He had massive layoffs. He put a pause in the advertising, which for all you marketing and advertising people is not the right thing to do. But he did. And so failure, I'm going to say, is part of ambiguity. Edison said, "I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." So you're getting the idea of what entrepreneurs look like. Now I want you to help me work on something together. So we're going to practice. So you're going to work on the first attribute that we talked about, and that was spotting opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 pictures, and you're going to tell me what is the problem or the opportunity, because a lot of times problems are opportunities in disguise. Okay, so we're going to put our entrepreneurial thinking hats on now. Now, when we're done with this, I'm going to give you a few more things about what you can do to work on your own enlargement by way of entrepreneurial thinking. So we've got what? A beautiful bride. We've got another beautiful bride. And we have another beautiful bride. So what's the problem? Where's there an opportunity? Can anybody see where there could be an issue here? So how many women have gotten married in dresses at least similar to this? Raise your hands higher. Okay. Yeah. I think this is the problem. Right? Entrepreneurial people see that. By the way, just sort of an aside, because when I see a squirrel, I run to the squirrel. You know what really bugs me, and this is what I like to talk about to young people when they start thinking about, I want to be an entrepreneur. I say, develop a bug list. What bugs you? You know what bugs me? And I don't even like coffee, but I love tea. If you go to Starbucks, I guarantee you every person in this room has had this happen. You get the cup, you're all happy, you paid your $12 for, and you go, oh, this is going to be so good. Boom! Oh, it's hot. Have you ever done that? Okay. Why can't they put a little litmus piece of paper on that top to give you an idea of the temperature so you know when you can drink the cup? That bugs me. I'm paying $150 for a cup of coffee. You could put a little indicator on the cup. Entrepreneurs see this. So what did they come up with? The bridle buddy. And you just tie it up and you're good to go. And it fits right under your dress. And by the way, it is for sale, and I think it's about $87, which is great. It's brilliant. You've spent $1,000 on the dress. Upsell it for another $100. If you don't think you'll have a problem, I will tell you you will, and you'll buy that for another $89. Okay, here's the second one. What do they look, describe what you're seeing. They all look like me. And, that's nothing wrong with that, but are old people the only people that use these? Of course not. How about this guy? He doesn't want an old man's inhaler, because what's going to happen when he gets to school and pulls out the granddad thing? They're going to make fun of him. Some entrepreneur saw this. That's an opportunity. Boom. And I think you could go further with this. In fact, I'm thinking we're going to get University of Lynchburg inhalers, and we're going to the market with them. But seriously, you get a license it to cartoon characters and all these other things. So we just sort of practiced a little bit. I do want to leave you, though, with a couple things so that you can look at your own life and kind of say, well, how can I grow in this? It's one thing to look at other entrepreneurs, but you say to yourself, look, I'm not a Henry Ford. I'm not an Elon Musk. I'm not a Sarah Blakely. Do you know that Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx, never sought out to make a lot of money? In fact, few entrepreneurs do. They see a problem and they want to fix it. There's got to be a better way. You know what? She started the Spanx line. She was a salesperson. She sold copiers. And she was embarrassed to go into these buildings and have her panties show, her panty lines. True story. In fact, sometimes she wouldn't even walk into the building if she thought it was too obvious. She'd turn around and go out. She was too embarrassed. Said, I've got to be able to think of a way I could create underwear that she can't see. Started she's a billionaire. One simple idea. Now, whether you want to start a new denomination, start an underwear company, an auto company, there is something that you can push forward in your life. And I want to look at a couple things here. So we'll look at the acronym PLEASE. I have no idea why I chose that. I just couldn't think of any other word. In fact, I used artificial intelligence, put all my words in and said, come up with something else, and it couldn't. So here we go. Let's start with people. Network consistently. These are things you can do to get better because you don't have all that you need to get it done. The Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles if they didn't find each other. You had two really good songwriters and some average musicians, frankly, who could really write. Network consistently, especially you young people. You do not know who you're going to meet that can turn the switch on for you. Be grateful and show it. You know, one of my favorite days teaching is the first day. I love, and I'm going to brag on the lacrosse guys. I'm waiting for the baseball guys to pick up on it, but all of my lacrosse guys sit in the front. Any lacrosse people here tonight? Of course not. They're studying. They all sit in the front. They never wear hats. And they always say, thank you. Every class, thank you. They come up. I'm so-and-so. I just wanted to say hi, introduce myself. Seriously, this is not heavy lifting. You will differentiate yourself. Be grateful and show it. And then find a mentor. If you are of age, be a mentor, but find a mentor. Find somebody you really connect with, and they won't be the same for your whole life. They may have different skill sets, and you may not need them when you're 25, but right now you need this. And most of us are more than happy to sit with you and share with you what we've learned or what we might be able to help you with. Whoops. If you're leading, encourage and support autonomy. Unleash the entrepreneurial thinking in others. Did you ever work for somebody, and for those of us that might be a little older, it just, if somebody said to me, look, I want you to plan the Christmas party this year. Now, I think we should get a Douglas fir because I think that's the best tree. And I just want you to make sure that it's going to be about 7 feet tall. But I want you to plan everything. I want you to go to the local Boy Scouts and buy it there. And I want these kind of decorations. It just squashes you. You just feel like, well, do it yourself. Unleash the entrepreneurial spirit in other people. And not only are you going to breathe life into them, they may actually like it. You might be creating some really interesting opportunities for them. Would I feel empowered if my supervisor was me? And I like Dr. Michael Nagler said, organizations don't need robots. We need people who can think, critically think. Full participation of all players, Bill Belichick. How many people like the Patriots? How many people don't like the Patriots? Okay. I'm just saying the Eagles beat the Patriots in 2017. So. But they didn't do so well this year. Anyway, one thing he had the knack of doing, he found the right people on the team. He was always able to create synergy somehow with people that were average players potentially. Next one, learn. Live to learn, learn to live. Don't ever stop learning and asking, what if, why not? What worked? What didn't work? Lessons. Who do I know that has been there before? We used to call it a post-mortem. Any meeting that I ever was in where we would pitch to a Harley Davidson or whatever, we'd leave the meeting and we'd say, what could have we done better? What worked? What should have we done? Did we miss anything? If we do this again, what would we do differently? Because that's where you're learning. You don't learn when you're winning all the time. Am I growing as a person? Read, 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 be curious. My wife, who's sitting in the back, hi, hon. She's a terrible introvert, and it's quite fun to do this to her. She's very different than myself and has a lot of different interests. And I remember one time, 15 years ago, she said, I want to go to a dog show. A dog show? I don't want to go to a dog show. And then I thought of this. Be curious. Be open to it. Maybe something might strike you. And we went to the dog show, and it was a lot of fun. Sometimes you find things at the most unexpected places. Do you know that when Southwest, and by the way, they only make money when the planes are in the air. They call it wheels up. We want to reduce the time of the plane on the ground. We got to get the wheels up. Got to get the wheels up. What industry do you think they looked at to figure out how to be more efficient to turn it around on the ground? Fuel it, clean it, get the people on. What do you think they looked at? Anybody got a guess? NASCAR. Total different industry. Be curious. You can take something from this and bring it into what you're doing currently. Ben Franklin says an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. And I was paid by the president to say that tonight. So stay in school, work hard. It's a great place to get a master's degree. Okay, enough of that commercial. Empathy. Entrepreneurs are empathetic. And what do I mean by that? They can put themselves in the position of the other person. What if I was 9 years old and had to use an old man inhaler? I wouldn't like that. So, and you can fill the blank in here. Can I put myself in the shoes of a client, student, neighbor, wounded veteran, disenfranchised community member? How does it make me feel? You can practice that. To sit with it and say, I get that. I could see why that might be a problem for them. Ambiguity. We've talked about this. But being ambiguous, being in this, and some of us don't like this at all. I know some of you students would say to me, look, what do I need to do to get an A? That's all I want to know. And I'm like, well, you know, this assignment isn't like ABC. It's, you got to be thinking and you're going to do, and you don't like that. But life's like that. I don't know what's going to happen for sure. And so learning to be comfortable in that and sort of sit with it and say, how am I feeling? How can I stay in this space if I'm not in control of blank? Committees, the economy, consumers, competitors, events, technology, politics. How am I going to stay in this space in spite of the fact that I don't control much? At the end of the day, you know what we get to control? That's it. I know I'm looking into leadership theory tonight, but I can't control others really, and I can't control the environment beyond that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling in it. The S is systems. Create systems and processes that allow for implementation at scale. If this thing does grow, how can we make it work at a larger scale? What systems and processes need to be in place to make the vision a reality? Don't neglect outside counsel here. Call people up that you know have been through this before. How can I do this? What if this happens? What would you suggest I do? And lastly, evolution, not revolution. Purposeful, incremental change toward a big idea. Don't get discouraged if you've got a business idea or you're trying to do anything entrepreneurial and it isn't like catching fire. Just keep doing it. Do the next right thing. Keep plugging away at it. Is the current momentum sustainable? If not, how can I take a smaller step forward? Let's say it goes the opposite way and it goes crazy, but I can't keep up with my orders or I can't manage it anymore. Take a step back. Do I need to take a smaller step? Actualize these small pieces of a puzzle that eventually creates a picture. So I'll repeat them again. Please, people learn empathy, ambiguity, systems, evolution. I hope you got something out of it, and I would love to take any questions that you might have. We got some mics here, or you can just yell. That's fine. Any questions at all? Oh, it's quarter late. I said 45. You have a question? Go ahead.
What's your favorite campaign that you've ever worked on, if you had to choose one?
Oh, my favorite campaign was a campaign that never ran. It was a once-in-a-lifetime campaign. I wanted to run this was back during the election of John Kerry and George W. Bush. Does anybody in here under 20 even know what I'm talking about? I worked at a lawn and garden industry, in the lawn and garden industry at the time. We did about $40 million in all kinds of things, outdoor related. And I came up with this campaign, and this was it. I set up a big sale, and I wanted to capitalize on it, and I wanted to offer X amount off of all the plant material you can carry. You get it? And then 20% off of all of the bushes that you can load in your truck. Carry bush. I just ran it like a political ad well, I wanted to, in the Philadelphia Inquirer. I thought this is going to be great. And of course, my boss, she said, I don't think that's going to be good. That's one, but it was a small campaign. But on a larger scale, I think one of the things I really enjoyed doing, and again, it was always looking for opportunities, we had, in retail, you're always looking for, you're trying to make up stuff if you can even make up a day, right? Because Mother's Day is synonymous with what? Flowers. Well, somebody owned that. And so what I used to do is sit and think about what we might be able to tag onto that's already occurring. And so do you know what the longest day of the year is? June the 20th or 21st. I went to my boss. I said, we're going to have a longest day of the year sale, and we're going to stay open till midnight. And I pitched this to all the senior executives. I said, we're going to open up all of the growing areas, and we're going to ask our growers to come back, and they're going to sort of like give an inside view of all of the plant material and how they would maintain them. And our customers are going to love this because you're providing them expertise, and you're going to show them behind the scenes. And all of a sudden, people in the group said, that's never going to work. They said, first of all, it'll be at night, and we'd have to get lighting in. I said, well, then we're going to get lighting in. And they said, well, yeah, but there'll be tripping hazards. Chris can appreciate all this. I said, no, there's not going to be tripping. We're going to do it. And they said, well, we can't get the people to cover it. And I said, I'm staking my career on this. I've never done that before, and I will never do it again. I said, this is going to work. And we pushed it. We pushed it through, and all of a sudden, we opened it. So we closed the building, and everything was shut down. Well, an hour later, we reopened for this secret event we were going to have. And the president comes running in. I was still in my office, and he says, you're never going to believe it. I said, what? He said, we have traffic problems. They're backed up for half a mile each way trying to come into, and it was just the most gratifying event. Anyway, that made me happy. I failed far more than I succeeded, though. Any other questions about anything? Okay, Chris.
Can you help me understand the ambiguity aspect of this? I'm not sure if it's referring to entrepreneurs being comfortable with ambiguity, or so I'm not sure if it's entrepreneurs being comfortable with ambiguity, or just being comfortable with the fact that you can't control everything.
Both. Because I can't control everything, it will be ambiguous. And I have to be okay with that, or I will never keep plugging along. I'm going to eventually say, this is too risky, too scary for me. I want to turn around and go back. So you've got to sort of be able to sit in that, and I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out.
I was just about to ask, what about like an unknown outcome, and just being comfortable with not knowing that you'll have it perfect?
That, I think, and we talk about this in terms of iterations and testing and piloting these things. But I think as entrepreneurs, when we see those opportunities and we say, you know what? Baking soda isn't really selling right now to bakers because there's not a lot of people baking, but what if we put them in every refrigerator? Total different outcome, same product. Somebody at that company said, look, here's another opportunity that we didn't cash in on. So I think it does often change. Ford wanted to be a watchmaker. There was another question back. You had one.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges you encountered while you're doing your entrepreneurship?
Capital. I think trying to get the money up front, and you'll go to friends and you'll ask. But that always seems to be the biggest issue, is just where do I get the money to start it? Everybody in here has great ideas. A few of you will act on them. And I think that, there could be easier ways to on-ramp into these opportunities without making huge capital investments, to test the concept in a smaller way and before you launch larger. I work with a private equity firm out in Seattle, and they have some rules. They invest in entrepreneurs all the time. They don't invest in technology. They want at least third generation. So they're entrepreneurial, but not the first one, because there's far more failure. But But if you don't succeed, you learn something that you take to the next one. Brian Scudamore, who started 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he started numbers of companies that didn't do all that well. But after about the fifth one, it caught on. Well, this has been wonderful for me. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot. And again, I hope you learned something. Thanks.